Okay, so this is not going to be a positive video, but I think it is an important subject that we need to address. Jeez, look at that. Okay, that smells terrible. Okay, right behind me is a pile of Fraser River sockeye salmon, dead Fraser River sockeye salmon. During this time of year in August, you can probably see this pretty often in the Fraser Valley, but it's not really talked about in the public, and it's not really addressed in the mainstream media, but I want to talk about that today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 right here at least, and coming over this way there's at least another 10, I think. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then looks like there's at least 3 inside the bag, so looks like around 20 fish. We're gonna talk about this when we get home. This is not acceptable. Smells over there. What a waste of fish. Okay, now that we're back in the house, let's talk about this. The videos that you find on this channel tend to be somewhat entertaining, usually. I like to show you all how fun fishing is, and at times we'll do a silly video like eating a salmon head like you saw in our previous episode. But if there is a problem when it comes to our fishery, I like to talk about that as well. I like to find solutions and try to make a difference in the community. So the Fraser River sockeye salmon fishery can be somewhat political, and because of that, the biological aspect of this fishery tends to be ignored and forgotten. Let's spend some time to talk about that. Historically, this is the largest sockeye salmon run in the world. On average, in the past 100 years, between 5 and 10 million fish would return to the Fraser River. On a really good year, back in the early 1900s, up to 30 to 40 million fish will come back to the river, which is a lot of fish. In the past 10 years, we've had a couple really good years. Back in 2010, we had a record return that was over 20 million fish. And in 2018, up to just under 10 million fish came back as well. So those are pretty good years. The life cycle of the sockeye salmon is 4 years. So every 4 years, you have the same cycle returning to the river. The cycle fluctuates. So you can have a really good year and then a really bad return, and so on. This is due to environmental factors. So how well the population does really depends on how good the ocean condition is and how productive the river is. There's so many different environmental factors involved. They really have to be in sync to produce a good return. So you could have a really strong year, and then the following year, when the offsprings come back in 4 years later, you could have a really low return, and you could also have it the other way around as well. So it's not always on a constant decline, and it's not always on an upward trend. Adding human factors into it, such as harvesting, habitat degradation, etc., that fluctuation intensifies. So managers have a hard time estimating the amount of fish coming back, because you really have to assess the environment, but also take into human activities into account as well. And it's a really, really tough job. And so for anyone to say, hey, they got it wrong again, well, most of the time they will get it wrong, because simply there's so many uncertainties involved, and so many factors that we still don't know enough, and we're constantly learning new things. So if you look at the size of the run of a sockeye salmon as a pie, managers have to figure out how to divide that pie accordingly. So the priority is to get the certain number of fish back onto the spawning ground, and that's known as the escapement goal. So you need to get the escapement goal is to get that number of fish back so we can achieve sustainability. You need that many spawners to spawn to produce offsprings so we can have a sustainable return in the future. So once that's achieved, the First Nations gets to have their full social ceremonial fisheries because they have the inherent rights to do so. followed by this commercial fisheries and recreational fishery. So the pie, if the pie is really, really big, that makes the job really easy for managers to divide. So you can divide, you can have, if the abundance is high, then you can definitely achieve escapement goal, then there's plenty of fish left for everyone else. But if the pie is small, that becomes really challenging. The pre-season forecast of a salmon return is an estimate of number of adult salmon that may come back to the rivers a few months before the fishing season begins. And this is an educated guess based on a few indicators such as juvenile survival rate when they start going into the ocean, and also environmental assessment. So the mortality of the adult salmon in the ocean really is just a guess, because once these fish are in the ocean, we don't know what's going on with those fish until they start coming back. The forecast is based on a probability level. And so we usually look at the P50, the median estimate, which is the 50% chance. There's a 50-50 chance that this number of fish will come back. And usually we don't get that right. So again, it is an estimate, and a lot of times these fish will come back short, and occasionally they come back exceptionally high, much higher than the P50 level, such as in 2010, where a lot more fish come back than we first expected, which is what we all want to see. For this year, the Fraser River sockeye is divided into 4 different groups. So we have the early Stewart run, the early summer run, and late summer run. For the early Stewart run, which comes back in June, this year the run has done exceptionally well. The number of fish returning so far has been doubled of the preseason forecast, which is fantastic. For the early summer run, they have not done as well. The preseason forecast was 1.5 million fish, but so far only 660,000 fish are expected to return to the river. For the summer run, the preseason forecast was 4 million fish, and we're coming a little short right now. The in-season estimate is 3.5 million fish. For the late summer run, it's not doing as well. The preseason forecast is 2 million fish. The in-season estimate right now is 1.6 million fish. Because some of the runs have come in much lower than the preseason forecast, only the First Nations have had the opportunities to take part in the food, social, and ceremonial fisheries. Very, very unlikely we're going to see a recreational or commercial opening for the Fraser River sockeye salmon. For the food, social, and ceremonial fisheries, the fish harvested actually can't be sold legally. Unfortunately, we see this from time to time. Illegal sales of sockeye salmon are popping up online, and it's not just a problem caused by the sellers, but the demand is also fueling the problem. When you put a price tag on these fish and there is a demand while supply is available, that is a problem. These fish, once caught, have to be sold within a certain amount of time before they go bad. And if you don't find the buyers and these fish go bad, they have to be just dumped, be disposed. And that's what we saw in this video. Those 20 fish dumped could have fed multiple families. To me, it's such a waste. For someone like myself who grew up in a family where we don't waste any fish, we eat everything from head to tail. It's really heartbreaking to see 20 precious sockeye salmon being wasted like that. And not just one dump. And who knows how many dumps there are out there, right? It's really, really unfortunate, especially during a year when conservation is a concern. And this is not really talked about out in public. I don't get it. Like, why don't we talk about this? This has to be, that is why we're making this video. Hopefully all of you can share this video and bring this to others' attention, and making sure people are not going out and buying fish illegally, because it really is a shame that we're doing this. Well, I think this is a problem. We have to remind ourselves that this is the action of a few bad apples. We have to remind ourselves that most participants in the First Nation fisheries will not accept this. My only problem with this is it's not being talked about, it's not being addressed, and it continues every year. To my friends and colleagues in the First Nations, this is not a way to embarrass or discredit your fisheries. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I think it's in every Canadian's best interest to make sure our fish are not being over-harvested, are not being poached, are not being wasted as well. And I realize fish waste or any kind of resource waste happens in every sector, and but I see this problem right in front of my eyes in my community. I want to make a difference. I'm calling out for all leaders to take a look at this, and we need to address this and put an end to it. In the past few years, you probably have noticed I do like to highlight the positives in every fishery, including the First Nation fisheries. Just a few days ago, I was honored to be invited to the Sumas First Nation salmon ceremony, and that was quite an experience. I do want to share that with you. Besides sharing the positives, I think it is important to not brush the negatives aside as well. Collectively, we need to tackle this together to make a difference. In case you're wondering whether I have reported this to the local authority, I sure did, but I don't expect anything to come out of that. First of all, you just can't trace these fish back to the original dumper. It's pretty much impossible. Secondly, the enforcement is really thin right now. It's pretty much pathetic. In the Fraser Valley, the DFO detachment is half of what it should be at the moment, which was already small in the first place. But there are 6 officers patrolling anywhere from Mission up to Sawmill Creek at the moment. And that is a huge area to patrol to protect salmoning. So it's pretty sad. And you're probably asking, well, what can you do about it? Well, what you can do is you can share this video with your friends and family to keep the conversations going. Bring the conversations to your local MPs and bring this issue to the political arena. Be the vocal advocate of fish if we want fishing to continue. And secondly, we need to stop fighting with other groups. We need to collaborate and solve the problems. If we keep the fighting going, there'll be nothing to fight about in the near future. So, sorry about the heavy topic, but I feel like we need to talk about this besides just the normal fishing videos, which I promise you, they'll be coming back pretty soon. And if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your support so I can keep the content coming. And I would love to hear your feedbacks. Let me know what you think about this by leaving a comment on the bottom. Let's get the discussion going so we can all learn and find solutions together. Until next time, good luck fishing.